The Lightbringer was developed by Rock Square Thunder and published by Zordix Publishing, released on October 7, 2021 for the Nintendo Switch and PC. The world is afflicted with a corrupting darkness, and you are the only one who can bring light back to this fallen world. Guided by your sister's spirit, you set out to cleanse the monoliths plagued by the darkness. You'll need to keep your wits about you as you cross perilous pits, solve perplexing puzzles, and brave through hostile territory along with your trusty boomerang if you hope to succeed where your sister could not. You are the Lightbringer. The story is fairly simple. Darkness has plagued this world, and as the Lightbringer, it is up to you to gather the lost light and bring it back to the corrupted monoliths, driving away the darkness to save the world. As you progress through the game, you find bells that, when struck, tell you the story further, such as the past history with the monoliths, what led to the corruption, and more. With each bell, it pieces together what led to the events of the game, what is currently happening as you progress, as well as learning more about your sister's fate. This way of storytelling through breadcrumb trails keeps you attached, so that you may not forget why you're on this journey in the first place. While again, the story may be simple, the storytelling was executed well enough to maintain my intrigue with the story. The first level you play starts off with a tutorial segment that gives you an idea on how to play the game with the controls. The tutorial does a good job of explaining how to play, though it doesn't mention that you can dodge roll as well. That said, dodge rolling isn't something you may find yourself using very often, but can be helpful for getting out of a bad spot. If you're playing on PC, you can play with controller or mouse and keyboard. Personally, I went with controller, but it looked like there weren't too many issues if you were to play keyboard instead. How do the controls feel is a question, however, and I'd say they felt good. The jumping felt responsive, as well as the movements, and throwing your boomerang, though I will admit, aiming your boomerang while in aiming mode can be a bit tricky at times depending on how the camera is angled. The game plays with an isometric 3D camera, which allows you to view the level at different angles, but you can only move the camera left and right. This is more important than one would realize, as taking advantage of those camera angles will help you find some of the more well-hidden pickups. You can view the path ahead by getting to specific spots that will show you the whole map ahead. While pretty helpful to give you an idea of how far you are from the end, it can be pretty difficult to see otherwise what lies ahead of you as you play through the level. On the note of pickups, you do have a few to look out for. Of course, the first being the light that you'll find scattered throughout the level. In order to complete the level, you do need to pick up at least one light, as you'll be unable to cleanse the corrupted monoliths. Most of them are pretty easy to find, but there are some that are a bit trickier. They may be found along the path, inside a dungeon, or after completing a puzzle, to name a few locations. The next pickup you may find are the red crystals. These are usually much more well hidden than the more abundant light you'll see scattered in the levels. These are usually hidden behind a more difficult puzzle, behind a locked door that requires a key, or some harder to reach spots, or even in plain sight, albeit requiring you to angle the camera a certain way to see it better. Finding these crystals felt quite rewarding when you did find them, and none of the crystals felt so difficult to find to the point that you would need a guide. Each and every one of them can be found as long as you pay attention to your surroundings and solve the puzzles. You'll also find potions, which can increase your health up to 10 max if you find enough, as well as bells, which as mentioned earlier tell you parts of the story. These two, however, don't appear to be as important for completion, but still show up in the results screen after completing the level, which is strange, especially for the lore bells, as finding those can be quite important. The game's overall gameplay is a blend of puzzle and platforming, while adding some combat into the mix. The puzzles were easily some of the stronger points in the game, requiring you to think through how to solve them in order to explore the world further, whether it be progress to the end or find some hidden items. Some of them could in fact be pretty challenging, making it all the more satisfying when you do succeed in solving them. Not only were some of the puzzles challenging, but some of the platform segments could get tough as well, requiring some more precise jumps as you made your way through the game. The game has 19 levels total and 4 bosses, one at the end of each chapter, and the levels were pretty well designed, giving you a wide area to explore without it feeling too much like a slog to look through every location. Most of them allow you to go back if you ever feel that you missed something. There are some levels that do have a point of no return, however, which can be frustrating when you're trying to complete the level as a whole. But levels with that are much fewer. The combat system is straightforward and to the point. You use your boomerang to attack slime enemies, which can vary in certain aspects, armoring themselves with pots, steel armor, even becoming walking bombs to name some examples. While they are all the same enemies with just an extra addition, that addition can change how you fight them. What's interesting is that you can also jump on the slime to defeat them if they don't have the steel armor or bomb on them. While it does require a little precision to pull it off, it's helpful when you're waiting for your boomerang to return to be able to jump on enemies. The bosses, while simplistic, were also quite fun. My only criticism is that their health pool is quite large, which leads me to think that they could use a second phase to change things up a bit as you get closer to defeating them. Now I'd say this about the first two bosses really. The third one does have quite a bit going on and does feel a bit more challenging. However, the icy terrain could have also contributed to that, as movement on ice can be quite difficult. The final boss, however, was probably the best of them all, which is usually the case, but really stood out compared to the other three bosses as they did have multiple phases, but in the same health pool. The final boss is very spoiler heavy, so I won't go too much into detail, but I'd say I enjoyed that final battle the most. It really kept me on my toes. In terms of gameplay, I'd say the Lightbringer did really well. However, I do have some issues I feel that I need to address. Firstly, the game can be pretty challenging, which is good. I do love a good challenge. If for some reason you die at any point in the level, however, you have to start all over from the beginning, which could make traversing through the level again a pain depending on how far you were. Now, I personally wouldn't take too much issue with this, but there appears to be a glitch in the game where you may die even if you have more than one heart. I've had this happen a few times in fact. It's happened with 2, 3, and even 4 hearts left. I was very confused. I decided to try to replicate this later to see exactly what the problem was. I initially thought that maybe it was due to overcapping on potions, so I avoided picking up more than necessary. However, even when not overcapping, I was still dying. After further investigation and testing, it appears that the most health you can actually have is 6. While it isn't too terribly of an issue if you can only have 6 health, it is definitely a problem to display you having more than that, deceiving you into thinking you're safe, only to die suddenly when you have plenty of health left. I've died I believe about 10 times in my playthrough, maybe more, maybe less. About a third or half of those were while I had more than one heart. The hit detection for some items can be a bit off too. I have not noticed it too often until much later, where in the same level, my boomerang could not pick up a crystal at all unless I had hit it from a specific point, as well as a key not picking up until standing there for a few seconds. I don't know if there were other specific items that had odd hit detection or hitboxes, as some of them do pick up right away, whereas some of them take a second to register that you're picking it up. Other issues I have noticed appear to be possible oversights from the dev team. I at least believe that may be the case. In one of the levels, there are some citizens that you'll encounter and appear to be in distress. You'll notice a symbol above them, which generally means you need something to help them. It typically shows up in some mechanisms that require a part. However, there is nothing you can do to assist them. I tried clearing out the slime nearby, and the man was still panicking, not rewarding me, or doing anything after defeating the slime. I believe that they weren't meant to be interacted with, but it's possible that they may have been planned to have some interaction, but it was scrapped during development time. That has happened in only one level though, and while that is annoying, it's more of an inconvenience rather than hampering the gameplay actively. The other issue I noticed actually did hamper the gameplay some, and it is in one of the last levels of the game. At a certain point, you go into one of the caves and you have to survive a series of darts and fire pillars. One fire pillar, however, the first one in fact, is moving in a direction that doesn't make sense. It is moving clockwise, but the platform it is going over gives the impression that it needs to be moving counterclockwise. This unfortunately requires you to take damage in order to progress. I did look up other videos to verify if I was doing something wrong, or if this was how you did it, and unfortunately that appeared to be the case. Between the bugs and other odd issues, I won't deny that this game does have some problems in the gameplay department, but other than those issues, it's pretty well done. It just needs some polishing up. While the graphics aren't incredibly detailed, it is still presented beautifully, having a more stylized art that reminds me of Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. The first 3 chapters are themed around a certain setting, while the last chapter has a little bit of each one, the settings being grasslands, desert, and ice, all 3 of which are gorgeous. The colors have a bit more of a softer palette, which keeps any part of it from feeling oversaturated in color, leaving it easy on the eyes. The dungeons also give off that vibe that feels almost foreboding, I'd say. You know it's scary in there, but you must progress if you wish to save the world. All in all, the game's graphics are pretty solid. I have very few complaints about them, if at all.
The game has a fairly sizable soundtrack, with each level having a specific theme, and they're all just beautiful. The levels give off a more serene feeling when you make your way to each monolith. The dungeons you travel through also give off that good feeling of isolation and mystery when delving deeper into them, slightly adjusting the music currently playing rather than changing to an entirely different theme. Whereas your boss battles respectively have some more build-up and tension. The final boss especially gave off that great feeling of urgency as you progress through that battle. I think this game shines in the soundtrack department. I could easily get lost in listening to some of these themes if I wanted to.
The Lightbringer is a game that I did find myself enjoying in the end. The blend of puzzle and platforming was mixed very well. The puzzles felt rewarding to complete, and the story did keep me decently hooked as I progressed, even if it was a simpler story. The graphics and the sounds are overall pleasant to the eyes and ears respectively. However, I do admit that there are some issues that need fixing in order to keep the experience from being diminished too much. While it does feel rewarding to collect everything, there's not much to be gained from doing so, except that feeling of accomplishment. Now granted, I don't mind completing a game 100% just to feel that achievement, but I understand that's not everyone's cup of tea. The biggest issues, however, lie within the health not accurately showing how much you have, if you have more than 6 health. The last level before the final boss needs to be adjusted to not require you to take damage to progress, and some of the hitboxes need to be adjusted so that hit detection is properly registered. I'd wager all this game really needs before its release was a little more quality testing to make sure everything was set up properly. Who knows? Perhaps there will be a patch in the future to fix up these issues. However, until then, I will have to give the game a lower score due to said issues, which would be about a 7 out of 10. It's good, but it has a few issues that keep it from scoring a bit higher. That said, I would still recommend picking up the game otherwise, as it is still an enjoyable experience. If you're a fan of games that have a blend of Mario and Legend of Zelda, you'll find yourself at home with this one. One thing I'd like to point out before closing this review. In one of the lore bells, the game had described other weapons of light being used along with a boomerang. 2 of which in fact. One was a sword and the other was a crossbow. It makes me wonder if this game may have some content update or DLC in the future that goes more in depth for puzzles and combat. Or maybe even a sequel. I won't lie, after playing this game, I'd like to see something like that. Of course that could be just nothing more than lore, but hey, a guy can dream, right? That being said, this ends my review on the Lightbringer. My apologies for this one taking a while, as video editing did take a little longer, as well as composing my thoughts and replicating some glitches to verify what was occurring, along with, well, if I'm being honest, I did slack a lot too. I won't lie to you about that one. Again though, if you have any thoughts, criticisms, advice, anything at all, please let me know. I will continue to work to improve these video reviews as they keep coming along, and hopefully I can release them in a slightly more timely manner. With that out of the way, my next review will be Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker for the PC, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5 by Square Enix. Do bear with me though, as it will be a little while before this one releases, since it did get delayed. I planned around it releasing November 19th, but unfortunately I have to wait until December 3rd. While I am bummed I had to wait a little bit longer, I understand why, and I think it'll be worth the wait. At the very least, this gives me a small break to prepare for the eventual Endwalker review. Not to mention I think I have a couple other video projects I can do on the side. But until then, I'll see you in the next review. Happy gaming, everybody!